What happens to your DNA when the company holding it goes bankrupt? For 15 million people, that question stopped being hypothetical in March 2025. Years earlier, 23andMe made a simple promise: send us your DNA, a simple saliva sample in a tube, mail it back, and in return we will tell you who you are, your ancestry, your health risks, your genetic story, your most personal information, handled with care, forever. Then the company filed for bankruptcy, and suddenly, the most valuable thing left was not the test kit, it was the database. The founder who built the company, watched it collapse and resigned as CEO, came back through a non-profit she created herself and bought the company's core assets, including the DNA testing and research businesses. This is the story of 23andMe, a company that convinced the world to hand over its most private data, and what happened when it ran out of money. Anne Wojcicki co-founded 23andMe in 2006 with a genuinely compelling idea. She had spent a decade on Wall Street investing in healthcare companies and left frustrated by what she saw: a system built around treating illness rather than preventing it. She wanted to flip that model, give people access to their own genetic information, their real health risks, their ancestry, their predispositions, before they ever got sick. The company was named for the 23 pairs of chromosomes in every human cell. In 2007, Google invested $3.9 million in the company. The backing gave 23andMe instant credibility and serious capital. In 2008, Time magazine named the 23andMe saliva test Invention of the Year. The pitch was simple, and it worked. Send in a tube of saliva. Get back a report on your ancestry, your genetic health risks, your family connections. For around $99, it felt like the future made accessible. By 2021, the company went public and reached a peak valuation of $6 billion. 15 million customers had sent in their DNA. The database was one of the largest collections of human genetic information in private hands anywhere on Earth. That database was the real asset, not the $99 kits, not the subscriptions, the data, and everyone knew it. In 2018, drug giant GlaxoSmithKline paid $300 million for a 4-year partnership to access that genetic data for drug research. The data was worth billions. The company was worth billions. And then it wasn't. Here is the business problem that 23andMe could never solve. People buy a DNA kit once. They don't buy it again. There is no recurring revenue, no reason to keep paying. You send your saliva, you get your results, you close the app, and never open it again. For most customers, that was the entire relationship. The company tried to build a drug research division to generate revenue from its database. It burned through hundreds of millions of dollars. It never produced a profitable product. By 2024, the company that had been worth $6 billion was worth $80 million, a fall of 98% in 3 years. Then came October 2023. And the breach. A hacker using the name Golem launched what's called a credential stuffing attack. He took usernames and passwords stolen from other websites, other breaches, other companies, and fed them into 23andMe's login page until he found matches. People who had reused the same password elsewhere. He accessed around 14,000 accounts. But here is what made this breach different from every other data breach you've heard about. 23andMe had a feature called DNA Relatives. It automatically connected customers with their genetic matches, people who shared their DNA. When Golem accessed those 14,000 accounts, he could see not just those users' data, but the data of everyone connected to them through the DNA Relatives feature. 14,000 compromised accounts became access to 6.9 million people's genetic profiles. Names, birth years, ancestry estimates, health risk markers, ethnicity data, family connections, information that cannot be changed the way a password can. Information that is permanent. The stolen data was then advertised in targeted lists. 1 million profiles of people of Ashkenazi Jewish descent. 100,000 profiles of people of Chinese heritage. The data appeared on a dark web forum for between $1 and $10 per profile. 23andMe's response became almost as controversial as the breach itself. The company said the hack was caused by customers recycling passwords. It blamed the victims. At the time of the breach, 23andMe made two-factor authentication optional. Less than 22% of users had turned it on. The company had decided not to make it mandatory because it didn't want to create friction in the sign-up process. They prioritized a smooth user experience over protecting the most sensitive data most of their customers had ever handed to anyone. The UK Information Commissioner's Office found that 23andMe had failed to implement adequate security measures and fined the company £2.31 million. A joint investigation by Canada and the UK concluded the company had ignored warning signs months before the breach was even publicly known. The breach accelerated everything. Class action lawsuits followed immediately. In December 2023, 2 months after the hack, 23andMe updated its terms of service to make class action lawsuits harder to file. It gave users 30 days to opt out of the new terms. Most people never noticed. By March 2025, the company filed for bankruptcy. Wojcicki stepped down as CEO the same day. The bankruptcy court held an auction. The initial winner was Regeneron Pharmaceuticals at $256 million. Then, Wojcicki intervened. She argued that her non-profit, 23andMe Research Institute, had been unfairly excluded from the bidding process. The court agreed to reopen the auction. She spelled her own company's name backwards to buy it back. In the final round, 23andMe submitted a winning bid of $305 million. Through the court-approved sale, the company's core consumer, DNA testing and research businesses, built on data from 15 million customers, moved to a non-profit created and controlled by the woman who had built the company, run it into bankruptcy, and resigned as CEO. On July 14th, 2025, the deal closed. The Pentagon had previously warned military personnel not to use consumer DNA kits because of national security risks. The California Attorney General issued a consumer alert telling users to delete their data immediately. Privacy experts warned that a new owner could share genetic data with insurance companies, which could use it to raise premiums or deny coverage, or with data brokers, or with pharmaceutical companies. Federal law, specifically HIPAA, does not cover direct-to-consumer genetic companies. It covers hospitals and insurers, not companies like 23andMe. The 15 million people who sent in their saliva have almost no federal legal protection over what happens to that data. Here is what this story actually is. 23andMe was not brought down by bad luck or an unforeseeable market shift. It was brought down by a business model that was always more dependent on the value of its customers' data than on any product it actually sold. The $99 kit was the entry point. The DNA was the inventory. The data breach exposed what happened when a company holding the most sensitive information imaginable decided that a smooth sign-up experience was worth more than mandatory two-factor authentication. 6.9 million people's genetic profiles were sold on the dark web for as little as $1 each. And the bankruptcy exposed something else. When a company holding your most personal data runs out of money, your data can become part of the assets in a liquidation, not a memory, not a private family secret, an asset, transferred through a court-approved sale. The founder, who started this company with a genuine vision to democratize healthcare, ended up presiding over one of the most significant privacy failures in the history of consumer technology, then bought the database back through a charity. The court approved the deal. The data transferred. 15 million people's genetic data is now in the hands of a non-profit that did not exist 12 months ago. There is no federal law that clearly governs what happens next. Nobody asked them. This is what Untold Inc. is here for. The decisions made behind closed doors by people who knew exactly what they were doing and the cost that everyone else paid for them. If there's a company you think deserves the same investigation, put it in the comments. We read everyone. If you're new here, subscribe. We do this every week. New story, new investigation, new company that thought nobody was paying attention. They were wrong.